I want you to I want you to take seriously the challenge that I gave you 2 weeks ago about the little red bracelets, whether you get one or not, that somebody in your life needs to be prayed for. There is somebody that needs to be here or somewhere. It doesn't matter to me if they come to our church or go to another church where they encounter Jesus in a real way. Would you care enough about somebody to pray for them once a day, one person once a day for 1 minute? And let's see what God will do in the lives of the people around us and how their eternity and their trajectory will be impacted. Can we do that together? Okay. All right. So if you want to turn in your Bibles to Ecclesiastes chapter 4, we have passed the chapter 3 where Solomon took the song from the birds and wrote a chapter in the Bible about it, which we know is not really a chapter. Just like every other book that we have in the Old Testament, New Testament, it was originally written as a letter. It was written as a group of wise sayings. At the beginning of Solomon's life, we think, or the mid part of his life, he writes the Proverbs. Wise sayings that he either came up with or he gained from other people, he heard from other people, and he collected all of these wise sayings. A little bit older in his life, we see the Song of Solomon, which is about the love he has for the Shulamite woman. We see within their marriage that they're going to have sex 3 times in the book of the Song of Solomon. And you're going to watch this romance play out between he and the woman that he loved. And it is a very passionate book. But at the end of his life, as he's tried all of these different things to find happiness and to bring him joy, all of the things that he's tried to experience that will bring everlasting happiness, he writes this book to those who are coming behind him about the follies and the foolishness of life that we choose. I was thinking the other day, somebody said this, and I always thought it was funny, but now that I'm living it, it's a little bit different. Not quite yet, but you work your whole life to retire, and you spend your health and your time working your whole life so that you can retire. Then you spend all of your money in retirement trying to get time and health back. We don't think about it like that, but that's a truism, right? Anyway, I'm going to pass it over to my beautiful bride for a few minutes, and then I will be right back. I'm going to check on our kids to make sure they're not destroying anything.
Okay, so we are in 4, but we're going to back it up a little bit. One of the things, I just want to do a quick recap with you. At the beginning of Ecclesiastes, we read, if you're in the NIV, meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless, everything is meaningless. So what is the word that he's using there? It's the word hevel. It's actually the same word that Adam and Eve's son gets his name from. We pronounce it Abel or Abel. It's actually the same name, hevel. Same pronunciation. And what does it mean? It technically means a breath or a vapor. So, for any of you guys who have ever breathed, hello, Spidey Man. Spidey Man's waving at me back there. For any of you who happen to have ever breathed, you breathe and think of like wintertime in Michigan. Cursed be the name. You breathe and what happens to your breath? Yeah, you see this fog and then it dissipates. So what Solomon's telling us is that life itself is like a vapor. It's here now. We can see it. We understand that it's real. But then almost as soon as it shows up, it dissipates. So Billy Graham has this great saying that people say, I only believe in what I can see. And Billy Graham was quoted as saying, well, I believe in the wind, even though I've never seen the wind. I very much believe the wind is real, right? So that's kind of the idea of hevel, that it's here today, it's gone tomorrow. And as Solomon's writing, he's talking about all of these things that he doesn't understand, or maybe he does understand better than we do, why is it that things seem so temporary? And in some places he talks about paradoxical. Why is it the rain falls on the righteous and the unrighteous? But let's keep in mind as we get to chapter 4 that he is writing from a perspective that he knows that God has made a covenant with him. He has come face to face with God. He has got to ask for a blessing from God. He asks for wisdom. And so he's very much aware of God, but he doesn't know how God's going to work it all out in the end with Christ, right? We know he doesn't yet see how that's going to work. So let's go into Ecclesiastes 4. He talks about, in the first 3 chapters, the oppressed and the poor. Let me pull it out here. He says, again, I looked and I saw all the oppression that was taking place under the sun. I saw the tears of the oppressed, and they had no comforter. Power was on the side of their oppressor, and they had no comforter. Okay, so a quick thought here. He's looking at life under the sun. He is looking around and he's saying God has given him this idea of wisdom. He's helped him better understand the world than anyone else. And so Solomon is looking around at the world and he's seeing the rampant oppression. Anybody else noticed oppression in the world? Anybody notice this? Anybody notice anything that's so abhorrent it kind of makes you want to vomit? Okay, that's what Solomon's talking about. He says, I'm looking around, and back in verse 2, he says, I saw wisdom is better than folly, just as light is better than darkness, but the same fate overtakes them all. That's back in chapter 2. So he goes on to say here, I'm looking around and I'm looking at all of the oppression, and it is absolutely abhorrent. He goes on to say, I declare that the dead who had already died are happier than the living who are still alive. But better than both is he who has not yet been, who has not seen the evil that is done under the sun. Okay, let's take a minute to try to unpack this one. It's three verses that are actually incredibly powerful. We're talking about Solomon and all of his wealth and all of his glory. And let's not be delusional on the fact that Solomon did a pretty decent job oppressing a lot of people himself. But he's talking about how oppression is evil. So we look around at the world and we see this rampant oppression, and there's a list throughout Scripture of all of the different ways that people oppress one another. In Proverbs and in various different passages, it talks about people that are oppressed by kings, servants that are oppressed by their masters, the poor that are oppressed by the wealthy, the average everyday people that are oppressed by bureaucrats, the poor that are oppressed by other poor, the helpless that are exploited, aliens, widows, orphans, the oppression of being cheated at the marketplace, being cheated on interest, being cheated on scales, all the different ways one man exploits another person. So a couple of thoughts here. When we see oppression, something in us, if we have a good and tender and upright heart, it cries out. It cries out that this isn't right. I'm starting to teach World War II to my high school students. Prayers will be needed. Thank you very much. And I think of the stories of my grandpa coming back from World War II and the absolute atrocities that he saw. The way people were exploited in war, how bombs fell on the innocent, the tragedies of life. And when we look at the world and when we look at the way life works here on earth, if you have even an ounce of compassion, you say, this is wrong. And probably if you have an ounce of compassion like Solomon, you're looking at all of the things that are wrong or about this world. And there's also this profound sense of helplessness. Would that be fair to say? It's a pretty profound sense of helplessness. And that's what Solomon's saying too. If we look at the world under the sun, just life as it is, with a here and now perspective, and if we look at the way people treat other people, it makes you think, why do we even bother? Why do we even bother? And you've got to keep this in mind when we go on to the next section of this passage, that Solomon starts out this book by talking about, when I look around the world and I see all the people who are mistreated and exploited and used up, I wonder, was it better for them never even to be born? You've got to keep this in your head as we get to the next part. So then he goes on to say, there was a man all alone. He had neither son nor brother. There was no end to his toil, yet his eyes were not content with his wealth. For whom am I toiling, he asked, and why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? This too is meaningless. So now we're kind of shifting the lens, and now we're shifting to the lens kind of to the root of the problem. How does oppression come about? When one person says, I want what I want and I don't care what it costs anybody else. It's me versus anyone else. And at the heart of God, we were built for relationships. In Genesis, we were built for relationships just as the triune God is in relationship, right? So turning away from God at its core is a fundamental belief that me and my wants and what I can get out of life is far more important than anyone else, anywhere else. It's me, it's number one, and it doesn't even matter. And he's painting this picture here in 8, and he's talking about, okay, let's talk about like the wealthy guy. Let's talk about the wealthy merchant. He works and he works and he works. He exploits the poor. He gives unfair interest rates to people who can't possibly afford it. He won't allow even a gram of extra food to go to widows and orphans. He is going to make his servants work as long and as hard a days as he possibly can because it's all about what he can get out of them. But hey, it's legal, right? And then he goes on in verse 9 and he says, but 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their work. If one falls down, his friend can help him up. But pity the man who falls and has no one to help him up. Also, if 2 lie down together, they will keep one another warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Okay, so Solomon is arriving at the divine gift in all of this. When we see oppression, when we see exploitation, we see people doing what they can to get what they can get out of other people. But what is the inverse of that? Solomon is telling us the inverse of that. The godly model is not to use other people as a product, to exploit and to better yourself. It is to live in community and in relationship with other people. This is the biblical model. God did not put other people on earth for us to advance ourselves. He put other people on earth so that we can live in community, in relationship with his fellow creation, just as he lives in creation in the Trinity, or in community in the Trinity.
So it's interesting. I think that as we look through what Solomon is saying, the enemy rarely hits you with something, an attack that you know is so evil that you're willing to, you're just like, wow, that's evil. I'm jumping in. This is great. The enemy works through God's blessings to pervert the good that God created for us and for us to be, and he skews it. For instance, even before the fall of humanity, God puts Adam in the garden, and then he tells him to name all the animals. His job is to take care of creation. There was built into the order that God created in perfection for us to find fulfillment through work. How many of you liked your jobs that you did before you retired? How many of you are like, no, they were horrible, I hate them, I don't even want to talk about it? Okay, she's talking about being my wife, but not really. But so God gives us this good thing to use our creativity, to use our skill sets, to find fulfillment in what we do. I mean, I look at people who are craftsmen, like Michael in the back. He's able to lay flooring. He does things with his hands. there's a creativity that goes with what he does, an expression. No builder ever builds exactly the same. That's why we don't like cookie cutter houses when we buy a house. We want it to be, to be customized, because we want to see that creativity come out. The same way with ministry. I don't do ministry the same way that everyone else does ministry, I don't think. I mean, we all kind of have this general idea, but the creativity that when I study God's Word that I see, the way that we love people, the way that we have church is different. I find joy in expressing the creativity that God built me for. But you see that that's not always the motivating factor. What Satan does is he'll come alongside of you and say, yeah, maybe you were built for this, but don't you want to be so much more? I mean, if I took a class in grad school called The Doctrine of Hell. You want to talk about a cheery class. The Doctrine of Hell, and one of the things that my professor talked about, Dr. Presley, is that if Satan's primary role in creation was to guard the tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, it's when he's guarding that tree that he asks the question. He doesn't want to become greater than God. He wants to be like God. He became dissatisfied with his role in creation, and that's what led to the fall. So we're looking at those things that God has given us to experience joy, and it's when we begin to look at other people with envy, when we say, man, I wish I could drive a nice motor home like they do, or when we say, man, I wish I could do this, and our motivating factor is no longer about working in order to fulfill the purpose that God has for us, but now it becomes about climbing the ladder. Now it becomes about making more Benjamins. Now it's about advancing ourselves, even when it means to the detriment of other people. I think that Satan is really good about looking at our compass and saying, it's not a huge step off of the path, it's just 1 degree. How bad can that be? But if you take 1 degree off of the path that God has chosen for you in 1,000 miles, how close are you to the point that God wanted you to go to? Hundreds of miles. And so I think that it's a reminder, everything good, my marriage to my wife, we've got a great marriage most of the time. Occasionally we'll have a pedestrian marriage, but not very often. I love my wife. It's amazing to do life with her and to have our kids who are the challenge that God has given me, the burden to carry. Not really. I love my kids, but there will never be a greater satisfaction I have in life than experiencing the marriage to my best friend and partner. She is my person. But you know how he destroys that? One day I'm at a restaurant and there's an attractive waitress, and the conversation goes beyond, just chit chat and being nice to each other. It's like, wow, you're a beautiful woman. I'm just acknowledging creation, right, to her. And she looks back at me and says, I work here every Tuesday and Thursday. And I think, well, next Tuesday and Thursday I dress a little nicer. I put on my Drakkar Noir, and I go to the Applebee's again and sit in her section. We start talking about life and start talking about the problems I'm having in my marriage. And the next thing is, I have gone off the path of working through issues in my marriage to trying to find fool's gold outside of my marriage, and it's going to lead to nothing but heartache and brokenness for not just me and not just my wife, but our entire generation of Hargraves. It's not like Satan threw this out and said, you are going to be challenged in your faithfulness. He's like, it's just 1 degree off. What could it hurt? The first drink of alcohol I take, there's nothing wrong with it, until it becomes habitual, and now I'm an alcoholic, and now it's ruining my life. It was never, hey, you want to become an alcoholic? It's going to be a lot of fun. It's just take that first drink. That's how Satan moves, is just a little bit at a time. Okay.
And that's exactly where he moves on to in chapter 5. First, he talks about you see the oppression in the world and you think, why on earth does God allow this? These people would have been better off never being born. And then he goes on to say, two together are better than one. So he's talking about
Great pickup line.
you in Bible college. He mentioned that on Sunday, if you guys forgot. You were trying, babe. Good for you. So he starts talking about how oppression is bad, and then he talks about a cord of two strands are stronger together. And then he goes on to chapter 5, and he starts talking about your work life. And he says, whoever loves money never has enough money. And then he goes on to say, as goods increase, so do those who consume them. The sleep of a laborer is sweet, whether he eats little or much, but the abundance of a rich man permits him no sleep. He goes on in 14 or 15. Naked a man comes from his mother's womb, and so he shall go. He has nothing from his labors, and he can carry in his hand. Okay, so what's he talking about? He's talking about from the very beginning, you can see the oppression in the world. You can see the evil in the world. You can see the injustice in the world. And then let's take Shane's example. Say you have close friends that you start a business with, or you start working with, or you get married and the two of you are working together. And you start working and you start investing your life, like Shane was talking about before, the best years of your life, the healthiest years of your life, in money. And slowly that starts to eat away at your soul. You know, the root of all evil being the love of money, not money itself. And he's warning us in chapter 5, when you get so deeply invested in your love of money, when you start focusing on how can I increase what I have, how can I get more, how can I do more, how can I expand more, how can I get more, you are going to lose sight of what truly matters. You are going to start spending more time at work than you spend with the people that you love. You're going to start making integrity compromises in the work that you do that's going to compromise your character. You're going to start making deals that maybe you know aren't quite fair, but you can get a little bit more. And slowly, it's going to start rotting away at your soul. And it doesn't happen immediately. It happens little by little. The more you try to gain your wealth, the more you try to get yourself ahead, the more you try to store up more for yourself, eventually you're going to find yourself, if you don't get God before this happens, you are going to find yourself oppressing others, exploiting others, making unfair deals, being inequitable to others, and then you're going to start casting your friends aside. You're going to start casting your family aside. You are going to end up, as the great old song says, the cat's in the cradle, right? Particularly one of the more haunting songs you can think of. You've spent so much time gathering and building and building and building and building that you have betrayed everything you said you were building for. And so what does he tell us? Then we get to 18, which might be the capstone piece here. He says, then I realized, this is Solomon in his greatest wisdom. He says, then I realized it is good and it's proper for a man to eat and drink and to find satisfaction from his labor in the few days while he's in this earth. Verse 19, moreover, when God gives any man wealth and possessions and enables him to enjoy them. Take a note there. Who was it? Rockefeller you were talking about a couple of weeks ago? How much will it take to make you happy? Just a little bit more. When God gives you the ability to have enough, when he talks about wealth and possession, we're talking about a time in history where most people were one meal away from starving to death. When he gives you enough wealth and possession to not worry about someone foreclosing on your home, and you can enjoy that without constantly needing more. When you have this ability to look at the life that God has given you with joy and contentment, what does he say at the end of 19? This is a gift of God. This is a gift of God. Why is it a gift? And hopefully you guys are in this place, and hopefully you guys can pass this wisdom on to the generations that come behind you. The gift is being able to look at God's goodness and faithfulness, that you have made it this far and you have made it in a comfortable life. And what actually matters was never the money that you made. What actually mattered were the relationships you built, the type of character that was fostered in your heart, the type of person you became, and the type of person that you helped everyone around you become in the years that you were living. If you worked a 50, 60-hour week, it may or may not have helped your bottom line, but it may not have helped your character.
You know, believe it or not, anybody in here a billionaire? Okay, anybody not willing to admit you're a billionaire, but you really are? It's interesting that there's a new thing, a new group that came out about 10 years ago called the Philanthropy Group. Have you heard of them? It's a challenge that billionaires put out to themselves, because I think that they began to understand this truth that Solomon writes about. They decided that before they died, they were going to spend, I can't remember if it's all of their wealth or 80% of their wealth on giving back to society. So they spent their lifetime gaining billions of dollars, only to realize billions of dollars is not going to make you happy. Things are not going to make you happy. And so they began to think, how can we give back? I wonder if we were to take a survey in here of what you would say is the greatest joy that God has given you in your lifetime thus far, and the thing that you missed that took years off your life chasing, that you wish that you had just listened to what God was telling you.
So just this week, there's a girl that I absolutely love in my class. She's incredible. And she was talking to me earlier in the day. And I tell you this story so I hope you can realize really in the depth of your soul what kind of influence and impact you can have on your families and the people close to you. So there's this amazing girl. We get out of Bible class. At the end of it, she stops me and she says, Mrs. Hargrave, what you were talking about is what my grandma and I were talking about just this week. So I was talking to my grandma, and she was talking about how the way to truly find fulfillment in life is in self-sacrifice, giving of yourself. And when you pour yourself out in Christian love, then that is ultimately the way to find joy and peace and fulfillment. When we lay down our lives just as Christ did. That's exactly what my grandma was talking to me about. And I'm like, your grandma's fire. I got to meet this lady. She always has so many good one-liners.
She was my age.
But then later in the day, I see the same sweet soul. And she says to me, I'm like, what's your plan? Where are you going after this? What you doing? And she says, I'm just ready to go out in the world and make a lot of money. I'm just ready. I'm done with this season in life. I want to go out and I want to make a lot of money, and I'm ready to be done with this because I'm making a lot of money. And I'm like, honey, listen. Like, at that point, I'm fumbling for words because, like, what do you say to this sweet soul whose grandma has got her going in the right direction? But in the exact same day, she's telling me her goal for life is to make umpteen dollars, and that's what she wants.
And she is rarely at a loss for words.
I am rarely at a loss for words. There are imploders and there are exploders. I get choked up and I get extra words. This one had me thunderstruck. And so let me just take an aside here and go, whoever you speak into in your life, like, people keep talking. These sweet souls need you. They are precious, and there is hope for the next generation. But I am worried about them unless y'all get on the phone and start helping those grandbabies out. They need some help. We love them, but they need some help. And they need some guidance because she gets it in her head. she gets the wisdom that grandma's saying, that live a life of sacrifice, live a life of service. But then when she gets up and goes through the everyday grind of Pythagorean theorem and algebra, and I don't know, maybe I messed her up talking about the Enlightenment period, who can tell? By the end of the day, she's ready to go out and make a buck. And I have to believe that this is what Solomon's talking about. That is the folly of life, isn't it? The folly of life is that in our hearts, we know what is right. Our hearts are to love and serve others, to show Christ's compassion to others. But then we step out of this safe world of Bible class, and 5 hours later, we're ready to just make as much money as we can make. So Zeke had this really sweet story to me, kind of much to this, about, what matters and what should I do with my life. And he said, Mom, I give most of my heart to Jesus, and I give a lot of my heart to my family, and then I just leave a little bit for myself, just a little bit. And I'm like, well, sweetheart, that's really good, but you're missing a very important part. Here's how it works, babe. When you pour all of your heart and all of your love into Jesus, he will pour love back into your cup more than you had to begin with, and you will always be overflowing. You don't need to save just a little bit for yourself, because when you pour everything you have into Jesus, he will fill you back up more than what you had to begin with. And when you pour your love into your family who loves you, not just some Yoko off the streets, but like when you're pouring your love into people who love you, they will pour love back into you. So you don't have to walk through life thinking about how can I save just a little bit for myself. Because when you pour your heart into Christ, that love will never be wasted and that cup will never be empty. But isn't that what we all believe? We got to save a little bit for ourselves, because who's going to look out for number one if we don't look out for number one?
You know that my mom, outside of my wife, is one of the most important people, was one of the most important people in my life, and had a lot of wisdom for me over the years. And my mom said to me this when I would get sad. Has anybody in here ever been sad? There should be a 60s song about being sad, but I can't think of any. Anybody? I don't think so either. There's got to be a Beatles song. But this is what my mom would say when I would get sad. Hey, Jude. Yeah, that's true. That's right. Good job. But she would say, son, I know your heart is broken, and I know that you're deeply, deeply sad. When you feel that way, though, what I want you to do is I want you to go serve someone. Go volunteer in your church. Go love on other people, because when you're focused on other people, you'll be less focused on what's going on in your own life. And I think that that's really good wisdom. It was good wisdom for me. And I think that that's what Solomon's saying, right, is it's not about what you can do for, John F. Kennedy said, ask not. Yeah. I think that's why that resonates with us. Because when it's only about me, even if you win, it's kind of disappointing to celebrate with only yourself because no one else likes you. It's got to be about the relationships we build. Listen, Erica, one of her favorite quotes is, you never saw a hearse pulling a U-Haul. Can't take it with you. What can you take with you? The people you tell about Jesus. That's it. Your faith and who you tell about and who you take with you. So, I don't know where you are in life. I don't know what's going on. I wonder what Solomon would tell us right now. I wonder if we're still chasing the wind and what we think will make us happy. Because someday, when your health is gone, when your finances are gone, when your loved ones are gone, none of those, it doesn't matter how much money you have in your 401k or bank account. What matters is your faith in Jesus. So, have you spent as much time with the Lord this week as you have looking at your 401k? Have you spent more time with Jesus this week than you have watching the news? Have you spent more
Have
time?
you? Have you?
Yeah, that's Indiana basketball. Then, make sure your priorities are right. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is your relationship with Jesus. And the only thing that matters is you taking as many people as you can with you. So who are you going to pray for this week as we head into Easter? Who are you going to give the greatest gift you could ever give to these next 2 weeks?
And that's something Shane and I talk about all the time as we're discussing what we're going to be doing and talking about on Wednesday nights is we hope and, we really believe, we know you guys and we love you guys, that you've got this stuff down. You could be teaching this. But the thing that we hope is maybe by showing up on Wednesday nights, you'll be reminded that, man, you got to be investing the same knowledge into the people around you. Who is it in your life that needs to be reminded that all of the work and all of the toil will come to an end one day? It'll all come to an end one day. And what will you have left to show for the life that you're living? Who is it in your life that needs to be reminded that at the end of it all, no one's going to strap a U-Haul on the back of your hearse. You can't take it with you. Who is it in your life that needs to be reminded of that? Because we believe that you guys have got most of this down. But if we're not constantly reminded that if I'm not drilling this into my kids' heads, if I'm not drilling this into my students' heads in love, clearly in love, that you are meant to pour out your life as a love offering to the Creator, even as Christ poured out his life for you, then what am I even doing converting oxygen into carbon dioxide every day?
If you need to take a science class, she'll be holding a special session following the class tonight. I'm going to let you out early tonight, but I want you to ask this question. I'm going to put it to you this way. If I were to die on my way home from church tonight, following the service, Erica and the kids are in the Mom-mobile, the Vantastic vehicle,
The fam van.
the fam van, and I was driving my truck home, what is it my family will remember about me? What is it my neighbors will remember about me? What is it that the people I work with will remember about me? Our time is limited, friends. We don't know how many breaths we have left. Don't waste them. I was watching a movie. Anybody like movies in here? Okay, there's 2 of you. That's great. One of my favorite movies was That Thing You Do back in 1990s. You ever see that movie? She says to a boy that broke up with her that she had dated for a long time, she said, I've wasted 1,000 kisses on you. And probably all of us could think of somebody that we wasted too many kisses on, too many thoughts on. What is it that you're wasting tonight? What is it that you're chasing after the wind for? And what can you do to get back on the right path? I love you guys. Well, most of you. I won't tell you which ones I don't like. You're like, it's so encouraging to go to Wednesday night Bible study with him. But actually, I love everyone. I want everyone to know that in here. Except for Charlie. Anywho, God is calling you to another level. I'm going to pray for you real quick. I'm going to pray for myself, because if you can't preach to yourself, you shouldn't be preaching. So anyway, let's pray. Lord, I thank you so much for my friends in here tonight. I thank you for the life that you've given to each one of us, the calling, the relationships, the career, the creative expression, unique personalities, senses of humor that are all different in this room. God, first of all, I pray that tonight, regardless of our struggle, regardless of our hurts and our pains, I pray that you would remind us that you are near to us, that you have never left us or forsaken us, that, God, no matter what troubled waters we find ourselves in, that you will be there with us. Would you give us peace tonight? Would you give us a purpose that goes beyond ourself? Lord, we pray for you to remind us of that of which is most important. Give us an audience to listen to the words, the message that you've given to us. Help us to have divine appointments with people who desperately need to know who you are. We love you, Jesus. It's in your name we pray. Amen. One more story. When I was at Tomoka, 3,500 people, that church, right? There was a old guy. He was 87, so for some of you, he was a young guy. He had been a Hell's Angel bike rider or something akin to that. He'd come to Christ at the age of 65, and he had a bad ticker. He had at least one open heart surgery. Probably he could barely get around, couldn't mow his own yard, cussed like a sailor, even after he found Jesus, would come in and just criticize people. But he said to me, he said, you know, Shane, I spent my life pursuing the wrong things. He said, with every breath that I have left, I want to tell people about Jesus. That's what it is. That's where it is. So let's go get it, team. Let's go.
Am I the only one that keeps hearing that old hymn? People need the Lord.
It's not a hymn. It's a chorus from camp. But I guess we all know who is knowledgeable about music and who's not. All right. Yeah, that's right. All right, guys. Love you. Thank you for coming. And let's make a difference in the world.